The first scream of the day usually comes around 10:30 a.m. "The mailman! He approaches! Defend the perimeter! The mailman is a stooge!" I groaned, pinching the bridge of my nose as I stared at a line of faulty PHP code. "Captain, for the last time," I yelled from my home office. "He's just bringing bills. He's not a secret agent, and he's not a stooge." From the living room, a high-pitched, gravelly voice replied, "I've got my eye on you, stooge." This is my life. I'm Mark Harrison, a freelance web developer who lives in the kind of suburban neighborhood that has its own font. You know the type. Whispering pines, where the only things whispering are the residents, and the only pines are the ones mandated by the HOA's landscaping committee. It's a world of beige siding, identical mailboxes, and lawns so green they look like they were colored in with a Crayola. And then there's my roommate, Captain. Captain is an African gray parrot. I rescued him from a guy I can only describe as a shut-in cinephile. The guy's entire life was a rotating collection of 1980s action movies. As a result, Captain didn't learn to say, "Polly want a cracker." He learned to say, "Get to the choppa," and "I'll be back," and on one memorable occasion when I dropped a spoon, "Your one ugly mother?" Well, you get the idea. He's a feathered chaos agent in an otherwise sterile world. I work from home, so his constant bizarre commentary is usually the only thing that breaks the monotony of debugging code. He thinks my Roomba is a hostile ground unit and narrates its every move. Honestly, I find it hilarious. He's good company. My neighborhood, however, is not known for its sense of humor. The unofficial queen of whispering pines is Brenda. Brenda lives 3 doors down, in a house identical to mine, but with a garden that looks like it was trimmed with surgical scissors. She's the president, secretary, and self-appointed Grand Inquisitor of the Homeowners Association. She's the kind of woman who measures her neighbor's grass with a ruler and carries a clipboard on her morning patrols. My only run-in with her, pre-captain, was when I left my recycling bin at the curb for what she deemed an excessive 45-minute post-pickup period. I received a violation notice with a time-stamped photo. I was trying to explain to a client why their new logo looked blurry on mobile when Captain decided to practice his whistling. It wasn't just any whistling. It was the entire, note-perfect theme from the Andy Griffith Show. "What's that whistling, Mark?" my client asked. "Oh, just the wind, probably," I lied. "It sounds jaunty." "Very jaunty wind we have here in Ohio." I glanced out my office window and saw Brenda, frozen mid-stride on the sidewalk. She was walking her miniature poodle, Mr. Bojangles, a dog that has all the personality of a damp cotton ball. Brenda was staring at my living room window. She wasn't angry, not yet. She was processing. Her head tilted, her perfectly coiffed silver blonde hair unmoving in the breeze. Mr. Bojangles yapped. Brenda didn't even look down. She just slowly reached into her oversized purse, pulled out her HOA-issued clipboard, and made a small, precise note. I watched her continue her patrol, her posture rigid, her steps clipped and measured. I turned back to my monitor, a cold dread settling in my stomach. The code I was staring at suddenly seemed unimportant. "Captain," I called out. A beat of silence. "You're in a heap of trouble, boy," he squawked, in a perfect impression of a Southern sheriff. "You have no idea, Bird," I muttered. No idea at all. The problem with Whispering Pines isn't the rules, exactly. It's the enforcement. It's the assumption that any deviation from the beige, 45-degree angle mowed lawn norm is a personal attack on the fabric of the community. My house was my sanctuary. I'd bought it specifically because the covenants, while strict, meant I wouldn't have a neighbor parking an RV on his front lawn. I just hadn't factored in the human element. The Brenda element. I spent the rest of the day in a state of low-grade anxiety. Every time Captain spoke, I flinched. When he started doing his dispatch voice, calling all cars, we have a 10 to 19 in progress. Suspect is a squirrel, he's armed, with nuts. I actually got up and closed the window, despite the mild May air. Sorry, bud, I told him, scratching his head through the cage bars. But I think we're in the crosshairs. Captain just nibbled my finger and replied, Yippee-ki-yay, mister. I really hoped it wouldn't come to that. The next few days were quiet. Deceptively so. I received no letter. No angry emails. Brenda's patrol route seemed to conspicuously avoid my sidewalk. She'd cross the street and walk on the other side, casting long, judgmental shadows toward my front door. I started to relax. Maybe the Andy Griffith theme was weird, but it wasn't a violation. Maybe she'd decided I was just an eccentric, harmless shut-in. Then came Tuesday. Tuesday was my big client call. A potential 5-figure project redesigning the entire e-commerce backend for a gourmet hot sauce company. These were serious people. I had on my Zoom shirt, a crisp button-down polo that lived on the back of my desk chair. Below the camera, I was wearing gym shorts and one sock. The call was going great. I was walking them through my portfolio, using words like synergy and scalable. The lead client, a sharp woman named Cynthia, was nodding. We're very impressed with your back-end architecture, Mark, she said. We just need to be sure our user experience is seamless and that our brand voice is properly... It was at that exact moment that I realized 2 critical things simultaneously. 1, the weather was beautiful, so I had left my living room window wide open. And 2, I had fallen asleep on the couch the night before, watching Scarface. From the other room, with the acoustic clarity of a high-end studio microphone, Captain inhaled deeply and unleashed a perfectly timed, high-pitched Al Pacino. Say hello to my little friend. Cynthia froze mid-nod. Her eyes widened. The 2 other client faces on my screen just stared. I laughed, a high-pitched, desperate sound. Ah, kids next door, I stammered. You know how they are with their movie lines. Cynthia raised a perfectly plucked eyebrow. Before she could reply, Captain, now fully warmed up, delivered the encore. It wasn't words. It was a series of terrifyingly realistic, staccato, pew-pew-pew-pew-pew sounds, followed by a maniacal brock and the sound of his bell ringing violently as he attacked it. There was a long, painful silence on the Zoom call. Mr. Harrison, Cynthia said, her voice dropping 10 degrees. Is everything all right over there? It sounds like you're in some sort of active situation. Everything is fine, I insisted, sweat beading on my forehead. Just a very, very, very spirited neighborhood water gun fight. Listen, about that API integration. I managed to salvage the call, but the damage was done. The synergy was gone. I finished the meeting, closed my laptop, and walked into the living room. Captain was hanging upside down from the top of his cage, looking immensely proud of himself. They'll never take me alive, coppa, he chirped. They just might, you feathered menace, I muttered. I didn't have to wait long. Not 10 minutes later, my doorbell rang. Not a friendly, neighborly ding-dong. This was a series of sharp, angry jabs. Ding-dong, ding-dong, ding-dong. I opened the door. It was Brenda. Her face was the color of a ripe plum, and she was vibrating with so much righteous indignation I was worried she might spontaneously combust. Mr. Bojangles was at her feet, cowering. "Mr. Harrison," she hissed. She didn't wait for a greeting. "Brenda," I said, leaning against the door frame, trying to look casual. "What's up? Need to borrow some sugar, or I don't know, a ruler." This, I immediately realized, was the wrong thing to say. "Your bird," she spat the word like it was poison, "is swearing." "Brenda, come on," I sighed. "He's a parrot. He's just mimicking. He doesn't even know what hello means, let alone—" "I heard it with my own ears," she cut me off, jabbing a finger toward my living room. "It was a string of filth. It was about friends and weapons. And then it was the sound of gunfire, in Whispering Pines. This is a family neighborhood, Mr. Harrison." "First," I said, "it was one movie line. Second, it's not gunfire. He's a bird. He can't make gunfire." "It was a violation," she snapped. "A clear violation of Article 5, Section 3, Community Decency Standards. No resident shall produce or permit to be produced any sound that is obscene, threatening, or otherwise disruptive to the peace of the community." He was obscene and threatening. "Brenda, he's an African gray. He also thinks my Roomba is his mortal enemy and tells it to prepare to die. He's not exactly a criminal mastermind. He's a bird." "It's not just the profanity," she pressed on, her eyes narrowing. "It's the volume. It's a persistent nuisance, Section 4. I was on a call with the landscaping committee. We were discussing the spring tulip bulb color palette. We all heard it." I had a brief, horrifying vision of 4 other Brendas clutching their pearls in unison over a Zoom call about tulips. I'll try to keep him quiet," I said, knowing full well it was impossible. "You will do more than try," Brenda said. Her voice was low and final. "You will receive a formal warning, and if it happens again, Mr. Harrison, we will levy fines. Good day." She spun on her heel and marched back down my walkway, Mr. Bojangles scrambling to keep up. I closed the door and leaned against it, letting out a long breath. "You really did it this time, man," I said to the parrot. Captain, from his cage, just whistled the Andy Griffith theme. The letter arrived 2 days later. It was on thick, cream-colored cardstock, embossed with the Whispering Pines HOA logo. It was a magnificent, terrifying work of bureaucratic art. "Dear Mr. Harrison, it has been brought to the attention of the board that a formal complaint has been filed regarding your residence, 14B Whispering Pines Circle. On Tuesday, May 14th, at approximately 10:45 a.m., your avian pet, identified as Captain, was observed engaging in vocalizations of a profane and threatening nature. These vocalizations included, but were not limited to, 'Say hello to my little friend,' and simulated sounds of automatic weapon fire. This constitutes a clear and direct violation of the Whispering Pines Covenants, Conditions and Restrictions, CC&Rs. Article 5, Secundum 3, Community Decency Standards. Prohibits obscene or threatening noise. Article 5, Secund 4, Persistent Nuisance. Prohibits any animal noise that disrupts community peace. This letter serves as your first formal warning. A record of this violation will be kept on file. A subsequent violation will result in an immediate fine of $100. A third violation will result in a $250 fine and a mandatory appearance before the board to discuss further remedies, up to and including legal action. We trust you will take the necessary steps to rectify the situation immediately. Sincerely, the Whispering Pines HOA Board. Brenda Taggart, President. I read the letter twice. Rectify the situation. What did that mean? Give the parrot a lecture? Send him to etiquette school? I looked at Captain. He was cracking a sunflower seed. Well, bud, I said, holding up the letter. They think you're a gangster. We're in trouble. Captain just dropped his seed hull and looked at me. I'll make him an offer he can't refuse, he squawked. And that's when I knew. I wasn't just going to rectify this. I was going to solve it. My first week of rectification was a failure. My first thought was, I just have to keep him quiet. Simple, right? Wrong. You can't tell an African gray to be quiet. They're vocal. It's what they do. I tried the cover the cage method. The moment the blanket went over, the muffled, dramatic narration began. It's dark in here. So dark. A prison of my own making. Why have you forsaken me, Warden? The stooge is back. I hear him. Apparently, even in total darkness, he could hear the mailman's truck from a block away. This was, if anything, creepier than the movie lines. I tried positive reinforcement. When he was quiet for 10 minutes, he got an almond. This resulted in him being dead silent, staring at me, and then, when I finally handed over the nut, he'd snatch it and yell, "I ain't got time to bleed," before cracking it. He was gaming the system. I was getting frustrated. I was on edge. Every time he cleared his throat, I'd jump. I was starting to hate my own house. Brenda had effectively won. She'd turned my chaotic but fun sanctuary into a beige prison, and I was the warden. A week after the letter arrived, I was sitting on my couch, nursing a beer and feeling sorry for myself. Captain was quietly whistling the Terminator theme, which felt appropriate. My coffee table was a mess of code printouts, boîtes, empty coffee mugs, and in the center, the weapon that started it all. The Whispering Pines HOA bylaw binder. It was a 3-inch white vinyl monstrosity. It weighed about 8 pounds. It had been given to me at closing, and I'd promptly used it as a monitor stand. I picked it up, thumping it onto my lap. The sheer weight of it was oppressive. I flipped it open out of pure, morbid curiosity. Article 1, Definitions. I read aloud in a mocking, monotone voice. The association shall mean the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association. Common area shall mean all real property owned by the association. I was just venting, reading the drivel that was causing me so much grief. This is riveting, I said to Captain, who was preening on his cage top. Article 4, Section 2. All exterior holiday decorations must be removed no later than 14 days post-holiday. Oh God, who writes this stuff? From his cage, in a quiet, hesitant voice, Captain said, "Post-holiday." I stopped. The beer bottle was halfway to my lips. I looked at Captain. He was tilting his head, his little black eyes fixed on me. I slowly lowered the bottle. "No," I whispered. He didn't. I stared at the binder, a slow, beautiful, terrible idea blooming in my mind. It was so stupid. It was so petty. It was so perfect. I flipped a few more pages, my heart starting to pound. Article 5. Noise, I read, my voice clearer now. No resident shall permit any unreasonable noise from any source to emanate from their property. Captain, louder this time. Unreasonable noise. Oh my God, I laughed. I stood up and walked over to the cage. Captain, old boy, old pal, you're a genius. He bobbed his head. I'm your huckleberry, he whispered. No, you're not. Not anymore. I pointed a finger at him. You're about to become the most boring, bureaucratic, and compliant parrot in the entire country. If Brenda wanted my parrot to talk, he'd talk. He'd become the feathered, living embodiment of her own oppressive regime. The training began the next morning. I called it Operation Bylaw. I moved my secondary monitor into the living room and set up a small desk in front of Captain's cage. I opened a fresh pot of coffee, put a bowl of sliced almonds on the desk for rewards, and opened the binder to page 1. "All right, Professor," I said. "Let's go to school." Session 1. The Basics. "Okay, Captain, repeat after me. Article. Brock. No. Articly. It's like you like pirates. Articly. Article. Good boy. Here's an almond." "Okay. Section. Section. Amazing. Bylaw. Bylaw." He's a natural, I muttered to myself. By noon, he had the basic structure down. The problem was, he kept adding his own flair. Article, in the hole. Section, get down. Bylaw. No, I said, holding back a laugh. No flair. It has to be boring. It has to sound like Brenda, dead inside. Try it again. Article. He tilted his head, seeming to understand the gravity. In a flat, robotic monotone I had never heard him use before, he said, Article. Yes, that's it. Session 2. The phrases. The next 2 days were a blur of repetition. Just me, a parrot, and 300 pages of the most mind-numbing legalese ever printed. Okay, let's try a full one. Article 6, landscaping. Article 6, landscaping. Good. Grass shall not exceed a height of 4 inches. Grass not exceed 4 inches. No profanity. Not even the movie profanity. Just the words, Captain. 4 inches. 4 inches. Good. Now, Architectural Review Committee. This one was hard. R Pirate. Review. Brock. No, man. Architectural. Like arch. Architectural. Architectural Review Committee. Yes, you got it. I gave him 3 almonds. He ate them, and then, in his new robot voice, said, I'll be back. Okay, we can work with that one. It's almost threatening. Brenda will love it. Session 3. The Public Debut. After a full week, he was ready. He had memorized, and I am not exaggerating, the entire nuisance, Article 5, and landscaping, Article 6, sections. He was getting really good at trash receptacles, Article 9, too. I waited. I bided my time. I needed the perfect moment. It came on a Saturday morning. I was in my kitchen making pancakes when I saw her. Brenda, in her signature pink visor, was on her knees in her front garden, aggressively weeding her petunias. She was exactly 30 feet from my open living room window. My heart was pounding. It was showtime. Captain, I whispered, walking over to his cage. He was quietly grooming a feather. Psst. Look, it's the lady. Captain stopped grooming. He waddled over to the side of his cage closest to the window. He saw her. I held my breath. Brenda dug her trowel into the dirt with a vicious stab. And then, from my window, a clear, loud, robotic voice echoed across the silent street. Article 9, Section 2. Trash receptacles shall not be visible from the street-facing view. Brenda froze. Her hand, full of weeds, hovered over her yard waste bag. She looked confused. She looked at the sky. She looked at the house next to hers. Captain, taking a breath, continued. Section 2.b. Receptacles must be of a neutral earth tone color. Approved colors: beige, taupe, grise. Brenda slowly turned her head toward my house. Her eyes were wide. She stared at my open window, her mouth slightly open. She wasn't angry. She was baffled. Section 2.c. Receptacles must be stored no later than 6:00 p.m. on the day of pickup. That's when she knew. I saw the moment of realization. I saw the confusion curdle into pure, unadulterated rage. Her face went from, "What is that?" to, "He didn't." Her eye twitched. It was a glorious, beautiful, tiny little spasm in her left eyelid. She knew. She knew I knew. And she knew she couldn't do a single thing about it. What was she going to do? File a complaint that my Parrot was too familiar with the community guidelines? That he was too compliant? She jammed her trowel into the dirt, stood up, and stormed back into her house. I leaned against the wall, weak with laughter. "Good bird, Captain," I said, gasping for air. Good bird." "Mission accomplished," Captain said, in his old Terminator voice, before switching back to his new, dead-eyed monotone. "Article 7, exterior structures. No shed, tent, or—" Okay, easy," I said, wiping a tear from my eye. "Let's save some for the main event. And I have a feeling it's coming soon." For about 2 weeks, the neighborhood existed in a state of Cold War. Every morning, I'd open my windows at 9:00 a.m. sharp. I'd go about my workday, and Captain would provide his running commentary. As the mailman, the stooge, walked by, Captain would shout, "Article 2, Section 4. Solicitation is not permitted. This includes, but is not limited to, political, religious, or sales-related canvassing." When my neighbor started mowing his lawn at 7:30 a.m., Captain squawked, "Article 5, Section 5. Operation of noisy equipment is restricted to the hours of 8:00 a.m. and 8:00 p.m. The neighbor, to my shock, actually looked at his watch, winced, and shut off his mower. Captain was no longer just my Parrot. He was the neighborhood's feathered ombudsman. Brenda was apoplectic. She couldn't file a noise complaint because he was just talking. She couldn't file a profanity complaint because he was reciting the very words she held sacred. She was trapped. I'd see her on her patrols, power walking past my house, her face set like granite. But I knew a woman like Brenda wouldn't give up. She'd just change tactics. The escalation came on a Thursday. I was deep in a coding spiral, trying to untangle a JavaScript function, when I heard the knock. It wasn't Brenda's angry rap. It was a firm, solid, official knock. I looked through the peephole. 2 blue uniforms. Cops. She called the cops. I took a deep breath, walked to the living room, and hit record on my phone's audio memo app. Just in case. I opened the door. One was a younger guy, Officer Banks, who looked like he was fresh out of the academy. The other was Sergeant Miller, a man in his late 50s with a face that looked like it had been carved from a tired piece of oak. He had seen it all. "Sir," Sergeant Miller said, his voice flat. "I'm Sergeant Miller. This is Officer Banks. We got a call about a disturbance at this address." "A disturbance?" I asked, feigning surprise. "Officer, it's just me and my pet. We received a wellness check request," Banks said, reading from his notepad. The reporter, a Ms. Brenda Taggart, claimed someone inside this residence was shouting bylaws and threats at all hours, said you might be unstable, having a psychotic episode. I had to give it to her. That was a very creative angle. "Officers, please come in," I said, stepping aside. "I think I know exactly what this is about. Please don't mind the mess." They stepped into my living room. Miller's eyes scanned the room, professional and blank. Banks looked nervous. "So, sir," Miller said, "you feeling all right? Everything okay here?" "I'm fantastic, Sergeant," I said. "Just working? The only one here shouting is my Parrot, Captain." I pointed to the cage. Captain was sitting quietly, watching the two officers with intense curiosity. Banks looked at the Parrot, then at Miller. "A parrot?" "Not just any parrot, officer," I said. I stepped toward the cage. "Captain, say hi to the officers." Captain waddled to the front of his cage, puffed his chest, and in his most perfect, robotic monotone declared, "Article 2, Section 4. Solicitation is not permitted. This includes, but is not limited to, political, religious, or sales-related canvassing." Officer Banks, the rookie, took a half-step back. Is that the law?" he whispered to Miller. "It's the HOA law," I explained, trying my best to sound earnest and helpful. "See, my neighbor Brenda, she filed a complaint last month, said Captain here was profane. His vocabulary was, well, let's just say it was a bit action movie heavy. So, to be a better citizen, I decided to rectify the situation. I'm teaching him the community guidelines, so he's no longer obscene or threatening. I'm rehabilitating him." Sergeant Miller stared at me. He stared at me for a long, solid 5 seconds. I could see him processing 40 years of ridiculous service calls. I saw the moment his professional mask almost cracked. A tiny muscle in his jaw twitched. He knew. He knew exactly who Brenda Taggart was. "Is the Parrot threatening you, sir?" Miller asked, his voice deadpan. "Only if you're planning to install a non-compliant satellite dish," I replied. As if on cue, Captain squawked, "Dishes must not exceed 18 inches in diameter." Officer Banks choked back a sound that was half sneeze, half guffaw. He turned away, suddenly fascinated by my ficus tree. Sergeant Miller let out a long, tired sigh that seemed to carry the weight of the entire suburban experiment. He nodded slowly. "All right," he said, turning to Banks. "Radio it in. Situation normal. 1098. Avian resident is code compliant." Banks nodded, his shoulders shaking as he walked back to the door. "Yes, sir. Code compliant avian." Miller tipped his hat to me. "Sir, I'd recommend maybe teaching him some new material. Softer stuff, like the rules on flower beds. Just a suggestion." "I'll do that, Sergeant," I said gravely. "We're starting approved color palettes next week." "Have a good day, Mr. Harrison," Miller said. He walked out, and I heard Officer Banks finally lose it in a fit of laughter once they were on the sidewalk. I closed the door, my hands shaking with adrenaline. Round 2. Mark. Brenda's next attack was more insidious. If she couldn't get me for noise, and she couldn't get me for harassment, she'd get me for structure. A new letter arrived. "Dear Mr. Harrison, it has been noted during a routine inspection." I translated this as Brenda staring at my house with binoculars from her attic window. "That a large metal structure is visible from the street-facing view of your living room window. This structure, i.e., your parrot's cage, has not been submitted to or approved by the Architectural Review Committee, ARC. As per Article 7, Secontour 1, no structure, temporary or permanent, including enclosures, shall be erected or maintained without the prior written consent of the ARC. You have 10 days to remove the unapproved structure or submit a formal application for its review. Failure to comply will result in fines. She was trying to make me evict my parrot's cage. I was furious. This was no longer funny. This was war. My first call was to my mortgage broker. My second was to a contractor. A man named Sal showed up the next day. He was a big, burly guy in his late 40s, with a tool belt that looked like it weighed more than I did, and a face that had seen too much sun and too many stupid homeowner requests. "All right," he grunted, walking into my living room and sipping the coffee I'd offered. "You said on the phone you wanted a—" "What?" "A parrot alcove," I said. Sal stopped, sipping. "A what? Like a birdhouse?" "No, Sal, bigger. And in the wall. I need you to build a permanent recessed alcove right here." I pointed to the wall where Captain's cage stood. "I want it framed, insulated, dry-walled, and with a built-in vent. I want it to be a permanent, structural part of this house." Sal looked at me. He looked at the cage. He looked at the window. "Kid, that's a $5,000 job. For a bird. Why don't you just, I don't know, move the cage away from the window?" I just smiled and handed him the letter from Brenda. He read it. His eyebrows shot up. He read it again. Then he looked at Captain. "Article 7, Captain chirped from his cage. "Architectural, review, committee." Sal's gruff, sun-weathered face broke into a slow, magnificent grin. "She's fining you for the cage," he said, a note of pure disbelief in his voice. "She is," I confirmed. "So I'm not maintaining a temporary structure. I'm making a permanent home improvement, and I'm going to submit the plans to the RC." Sal started to laugh. It was a deep, gravelly belly laugh. "Oh, this is rich. This is the best thing I've ever heard." He slapped me on the back, nearly sending me through the drywall. "You're nuts, kid, I love it. You're my kind of nuts." He pulled out a tape measure. "All right, let's build this bird the fanciest, most bureaucratic-proof bird condo this town has ever seen. We're going to use pressure-treated lumber. We'll put in a vapor barrier. We'll get this thing permitted by the city, not just these HOA yahoos." "And Sal," I said, "here's the most important part." I handed him the HOA binder, open to the approved materials list. Sal read it. "You're kidding. All interior improvements must, if visible from the street, use approved siding and color palettes for an indoor bird cage?" "The window, Sal," I said. "She can see it. It needs to be a permanent, harmonious part of the home's aesthetic. I want the trim to be Whispering Pines Grieg." Sal looked at me, then at the book, then at the parrot. "I'm gonna need to call my drywall guy," he said, shaking his head, "and my electrician. We're gonna put in recessed, dimmer-controlled lighting. This is gonna be beautiful." For the next 2 days, my house was a construction zone. Sal's team came in. They framed out a 4-foot by 3-foot section of my living room wall. There was sawing. There was hammering. There were loud, professional-sounding contractor shouts. Brenda, I noted, watched the entire thing from her window. I could see the curtain twitching. She must have thought I was caving, that I was, I don't know, bricking up my own window. When they were done, it was a masterpiece. It was a custom-built, recessed alcove, painted a harmonious beige, with a thick, shatter-proof glass front and a small ventilated door. It was no longer a cage. It was an avian habitat. Sal hand-delivered the finalized, city-stamped permits and the formal ARC application for home improvement to Brenda's front door himself. I moved Captain into his new palace. He loved it. "This is a fortress," he squawked, climbing onto his new custom-built perch. "A fortress of harmonious gracia." I was just pouring Sal a job-well-done beer when the email hit my inbox. Subject: Emergency HOA meeting. Mandatory attendance. Brenda was done playing. She was calling in the troops. The email was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive escalation. It was forwarded to the entire Whispering Pines community. Topic: Resident Harassment and Community Nuisance by 14B. Mark Harrison. Please be advised that an emergency meeting of the board will be held this Wednesday at 7:00 p.m. in the community clubhouse. The purpose of this meeting is to address a series of escalating, targeted incidents of community harassment, mockery of the board, and persistent nuisance originating from 14B. We will be discussing and voting on further remedies, including significant fines and legal injunctions. Brenda had just declared nuclear war. She wasn't just trying to fine me anymore. She was trying to publicly brand me as a menace, a harasser. She was trying to turn the whole neighborhood against me. Mockery of the board. She'd finally said the quiet part out loud. Sal, reading the email over my shoulder, whistled. Wow, she's really going for the throat. Psychological warfare, huh? She's backed into a corner, I said, my stomach twisting. She's got nothing left but to try and shame me into submission. So, what's the play, kid? Sal asked, finishing his beer. I looked at Captain, who was admiring himself in his new, tinted glass enclosure. The play, I said, is to give the board exactly what they want. They want a resident who respects the rules. I'm going to bring them one. Wednesday night, the clubhouse was packed. I'd never seen more than 5 people in here at once, and that was for the Spring Fling potluck, which Brenda had shut down because of non-compliant Jell-O molds. Tonight, there must have been 50 people. The air was thick with the smell of bad drip coffee and cheap industrial carpet. Brenda was at the front, standing at a lectern, flanked by the other 4 board members. They all looked terrified of her. One of them, a guy named Gary, just stared at his hands the whole time. I walked in and took a seat in the back row. I was carrying a small, blanket-covered travel carrier. Brenda's eyes locked onto me. A small, triumphant smile played on her lips. She thought she had me. "Thank you all for coming," Brenda began, her voice amplified by a crackling microphone. "It is a sad day when we have to gather like this. A sad day. But this board, your board, has been subjected to a campaign of targeted mockery." She clicked a button. A projector whirred to life, displaying a blurry, zoomed-in photo of Captain sitting in his new, glorious alcove. "Mr. Mark Harrison of 14B, Chitore," declared, pointing at the screen, "has for weeks been training his animal to weaponize our own bylaws against us. He's trained it to shout our rules at all hours of the day. It's a persistent nuisance, yes, but it's more. It's harassment. It's psychological warfare." A few people in the crowd muttered. I saw my neighbor, the one who'd shut off his lawnmower, sink lower in his chair. He received a complaint about profanity, and this was his response, to mock us. Brenda was on a roll. He received a valid structural violation, and his response was to hire a construction crew to taunt the Architectural Review Committee. We are a community of rules, and he thinks the rules are a joke. She took a breath, puffing herself up for the kill. The board proposes an immediate $1,000 fine for conduct unbecoming a resident and a formal legal injunction, forcing him to remove the animal. We will now open the floor." The room was silent. This was it. I slowly stood up. All eyes turned to me. I picked up the travel carrier and walked to the front, setting it gently on the table in front of the lectern. "Brenda," I said, my voice calm. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board, my neighbors." Brenda glared at me. "Mr. Harrison, you are out of order. This is for the board to—" "You're right, Brenda," I said, cutting her off. "This is about the board. It's about respecting the rules. You're 100% correct. I am not a troublemaker. I moved here for the same reason everyone else did. For a quiet, orderly, and, well, compliant community." I looked at the crowd. When Brenda first came to me with her complaint, I was mortified. My parrot, profane? Threatening? I knew I had to act. I took her complaint very seriously. Brenda's eyes narrowed. She didn't like this. "I could have tried to teach him to be silent," I continued. "But as any animal lover knows, well, it's cruel. His voice is natural, so I thought, what's the problem here? Is it the noise? Or is it the content?" Brenda made it clear. It was the content. "So," I said, "I decided to rehabilitate him. I decided if he is going to speak, he must only speak words that this very board has approved, words that embody the spirit of Whispering Pines, words that we all agreed to live by." I pulled the blanket off the travel carrier. Captain was inside, sitting calmly on his perch. Brenda, seeing the parrot, scoffed. "This is ridiculous. He is a menace. He's the source of the mockery." "Is he?" I asked. I looked at the board. "Gary, you had an issue with my neighbor's lawn last week, didn't you? A height issue?" Gary looked up, startled. "Well, yes, it was. It was 4.5 inches. "Captain," I said, turning to the carrier, "what is the bylaw regarding lawn maintenance?" From the carrier, a voice as clear as a bell and as dead as a dial tone recited, "Article 6, Section 1. Grass shall not exceed a height of 4 inches. Weeds must be controlled. Edging must be maintained in a neat and orderly fashion." The room was dead silent. A woman in the front row covered her mouth. "Brenda," I said, "you yourself filed a complaint about Mr. Johnson's dog. A nuisance issue, I believe." "That is board business," she snapped. "Captain," I said, ignoring her, "what is the rule regarding pets?" Article 8, Section 2. Pets must not create a nuisance. Pet waste must be removed immediately from all common areas. All pets must be leashed. Someone in the back started to clap. It was Sal, who had snuck in and was leaning against the wall. The clap was loud, and it was followed by a few nervous titters. "Brenda," I said, my voice rising, "I have done exactly what you asked. I have rectified the situation. I have eliminated the profanity. I have taken a menace and turned him into a model citizen. Captain is now quite literally the voice of the HOA. He is the most compliant resident on this entire street." I looked around the room. "You want to fine me? For this? For teaching my pet to respect the rules you wrote? What's the charge? Excessive compliance?" You, Brenda was sputtering, her face a terrifying shade of crimson. This is conduct unbecoming." "Is it?" I said. "Or is conduct unbecoming calling the police on a neighbor with a false wellness check?" Gasps from the crowd. Miller had apparently told a few people. "Or is it conduct unbecoming to try and fine a man $1,000 because you don't like his tone? I looked at the board. Fining me for this would be, well, I don't know. It seems arbitrary. Captain, what's the bylaw on arbitrary fines? I didn't even have to prompt him. He knew his cue. Section 12A, Captain squawked, his voice echoing in the microphone. All fines must be levied with due process and must not be arbitrary or capricious. That was the kill shot. Arbitrary or capricious. The board's own legal language used against them. The room exploded, not in anger, but in laughter. It started as a snicker, then a giggle, then full-blown cathartic howling. My neighbor, the lawnmower guy, was slapping his knee. Gary, at the board table, was hiding his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking. Brenda looked around, her face a mask of pure primal fury. She had lost the room. She had lost the board. She had lost the war. "A vote!" someone shouted. "Let's have a vote!" "Yes," I said, looking at the 4 trembling board members. "A vote! All in favor of fining me $1,000 for conduct unbecoming?" Brenda's hand shot up, a single, quivering monument to her own defeat. Not another hand was raised. "All in favor of dismissing the complaint?" I asked. 4 hands went up. Gary's was the first. Brenda let out a sound like a deflating bagpipe. She grabbed her clipboard and stormed out the clubhouse's side door, slamming it so hard the approved spring fling potluck sign-up sheet fell off the wall. The room burst into applause. I walked out of the clubhouse into the cool night air, carrying Captain's carrier. I felt like I had just run a marathon. Sal was leaning against his truck in the parking lot, smoking a cigar. He had, indeed, heard the whole thing through the open window. "Kid," he said, plumes of smoke billowing around his head. "That was beautiful. Arbitrary or capricious. I'm gonna get that tattooed." "Thanks for coming, Sal," I laughed. "And thanks for the avian alcove. I think that's what really pushed her over the edge." "Any time," he said, clapping my shoulder. "That alcove is fully permitted, city-stamped, and HOA compliant. She can't touch it. She can't touch you." He grinned. "The trim color really brings out the room, by the way." As Sal drove off, a few of my neighbors approached me. It was the lawnmower guy. His name was Dave, and the woman from the front row. "That was brilliant, Mark," Dave said, shaking my hand. "My wife and we've been living in fear of that woman for 6 years. I got a fine once because my basketball hoop's net was tattered." "Seriously," the woman added, "she's a tyrant. What you did, it was like a revolution." "It was just a parrot," I said, feeling a little embarrassed. "Yeah, well," Dave said, "it was one hell of a parrot. Hey, this is gonna sound weird, but do you think you could, teach him the rules on sheds? Article 7, Section 4? I'm having a dispute with Gary about the approved roof pitch." I looked at the travel carrier. Captain just cooed. "I'll see what I can do, Dave," I said. "No promises. He's working on holiday decorations right now." Life in Whispering Pines changed after that. Brenda was still on the board. She'd been elected for life, apparently. But her power was broken. She was just a lady in a visor. She stopped her patrols. I heard she'd taken up competitive bridge as a new outlet for her rage. We never spoke again. When we passed on the street, she wouldn't even make eye contact. She'd just crossed to the other side, clutching Mr. Bojangles a little tighter. Captain became a local hero. The bylaw bird. People would stop by on their walks, and I'd open the window. "Hey, Captain," they'd yell. "What's the rule on fences?" Article 6, Section 8, he'd shout back. No fence shall exceed 6 feet in height on a perimeter lot. He was a comfort. A strange, feathered, bureaucratic comfort. About a month later, I was on my front porch, enjoying my morning coffee. A big moving truck was parked across the street. A new, younger family was moving into the house that had been vacant for months. The dad, a guy about my age who looked utterly exhausted, wandered over. He was holding the dreaded 3-inch white binder. "Hey," he said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "I'm Tom. Just moving in." "Mark, welcome to the neighborhood," I said, shaking his hand. Tom held up the binder with a look of pure despair. "Man, this thing, is it for real? I've been reading it for an hour. There's a whole page on mailboxes. Is that normal?" I smiled and took a sip of my coffee. "It's thorough. You'll get used to it." "I'm just so worried I'll miss something, you know," he said, flipping through the pages. "There are just so many rules. How does anyone keep them all straight? No moving vehicles parked for more than 24 hours. I've got a whole house to unload." I looked at Tom. He looked so young, so hopeful, so terrified of Brenda, whom he hadn't even met yet. I knew I couldn't let him live like that. "Oh, don't worry about that," I said, leaning back in my chair. I raised my voice and called toward my open living room window. "Hey, Captain, what's the rule on moving trucks?" From deep inside the house, a clear, robotic, and weirdly reassuring voice echoed across the lawn. "Article 9, Section 5. All moving vehicles, including but not limited to trucks or pods, must be parked so as not to obstruct the flow of traffic and must be moved from the community within 24 hours of arrival." Tom's jaw dropped. He stared at my window. He looked back at me. He looked at his binder. Did your parrot just say that?" I took another long, slow sip of my coffee. "Welcome to the neighborhood, Tom.